Hey, it's Jared with Gear and Light. Today we're going to talk about the DJI Mavic Air 2S, very big mouthful of words, and how it is 6 months later. Now, this device has been out 6 months, and it was a refresh to the DJI Mavic Air 2. And I decided to go with this because of the improved camera sensor, but I wanted to talk about my experiences with it, how I felt about it over the last 6 months. I didn't do a review when I first got it, but I've used this device, this drone, for multiple jobs. I am a Part 107 certified drone pilot, and I utilize this for work and also fly it occasionally for fun as well. So the 2S here is an improvement over the 2. It wasn't a substantial improvement, hence the S, but it was an improvement overall that I felt warranted me purchasing it. And I did have the 2. I had been flying the 2 for a while. I found that the size of this particular drone is very practical for me to carry around with me for real estate jobs, for when I'm traveling, doing stuff like that, and I want to take a drone with me that captures decent images but isn't a massive drone like a Phantom or even an Inspire drone. So the 2S, it's fast. That's one of the things that I like about it, is it is pretty quick. It does have a maximum of 42.5 miles per hour, but in the standard mode, it's moving around in the 30s as far as speed goes. So it is pretty fast. And it's pretty accurate as well when I'm flying and trying to do those kind of predetermined movements, rotating around a subject, stuff like that. Very accurate device, and its ability to remain stable in the air surprises me every time, even on days where there's a little bit of a wind. I'm often flying with a little bit of a crosswind, just the nature of where I am located in Montana. The winds kind of come through and over, and so if there's any wind at all, it's typically a little bit of a crosswind to where I'm trying to capture images or fly around. Eventually, I'm going to enter into that, and the drone just does a great job of remaining stable in the air. And, that's important, especially when you're shooting video. Now, quite often I am shooting photos with this. If I'm doing real estate photography or maybe doing an inspection or something like that, I'm capturing photos. But majority of the time, I also capture video just in case we're going to need it. While I'm up there, I might as well do another lap and capture some video. And the photo and video features of a drone like this are probably one of the main reasons why somebody would purchase it. Yes, it's fun to fly, but the camera on it is also a huge part of why this drone is as good as it is. And so once I get done talking a little bit more about the drone itself, I'm primarily going to focus on the photo and video aspects of this drone. So over the years, I've had a lot of different drones, especially from DJI all the way back to the Phantom 2. And a lot of times up in the air, I feel like the drones, as we've progressed through these different upgrades, have gotten better at dealing with winds and dealing with getting knocked around. The stabilization has improved, the gimbal stabilization has improved, and then the stability of the overall drone itself in the air has just improved substantially. It used to be like when the first Mavic came out that I couldn't put that up in the air if there was much wind because it would just get knocked around and it wasn't able to handle it. But this particular drone here, this 2S, handles a lot of wind, and I'm not afraid to put it up in the air on days where there might be 15, 20 mile per hour winds, where normally an older drone I wouldn't even consider it because it would get knocked around too much. And so I still try not to fly in anything over 25 mile per hour winds because that's quite a bit for anything to be up in the air. Anything can happen when the winds are blowing that much, and so I try not to go up in really over 20 mile per hour, but 25 mile per hour being my ceiling, because if anything was to happen to the drone, it definitely could fail much easier with the drone experiencing those types of winds as opposed to just a normal, clear, smooth air day. So overall, this 2S is very capable, very stable in the air, and it has a decent battery life as well. I'm averaging on days where there isn't a whole lot of wind closer to 30 minutes of flight time, even when I'm filming and taking lots of pictures. And a lot of times I am zooming around to different areas. It's not just a constant flight or a hover. I'm moving around quite often, going up and pointing the camera down, flying around, getting different angles, and so I'm really moving the drone a lot, and I get closer to 30 minutes of battery life almost every single time, except for those days where there's a lot of wind and the drone really has to fight to maintain stability. I'm getting more 24 or so minutes of battery life out of this drone. The transmitter, which I really like the transmitter. They updated the transmitter to this style on the Air 2, and being able to place the phone above the controls is a much better experience than previous Mavics where it was located below the controls. And so being able to place the phone here and put it right on top is just a much better viewing experience for me than it is with it mounted at the bottom. So if you are, trying to consider what drone to get, I would consider this transmitter configuration over any of the other Mavics that have it mounted down below. Of course, we are any day now supposed to see an updated Mavic 3, and so I'm sure there will be a reconfiguration of this controller for the Mavic 3. But as far as the 2S here, I feel like we're going to see this drone for a little while before getting an update, at least well into 2022. So this has a 20 megapixel camera for capturing photos, and it does a pretty good job of capturing photos. I liken this camera to a high-end smartphone camera. So imagine flying around in the sky with an iPhone 13 Pro or something like that. You're getting a pretty fantastic image, but it still is not an image like what you would get out of a DSLR or a mirrorless style camera. So the focal length is a 35 millimeter equivalent, which is a pretty wide view for being up in the sky. There is no zoom on this natively. You can zoom a little bit digitally, but it's just, you're going to lose image quality if you do that. So 35 millimeter is the equivalent, which means you're going to have to get really close to things, or maybe even get back a little bit to get something all in the scene. And they determine that view as 88 degrees of view. So the aperture of the lens on this camera is f2.8, and that is a fixed aperture. This type of camera does not have an adjustable aperture like a bigger camera does. And so that means your adjustments are going to be the shutter speed and the ISO, and that's it as far as adjusting your exposure. I found that I always need to go into pro camera mode to adjust those settings manually, and I have a separate video where I talked about how to use those manual camera modes on this particular drone, so make sure to check that out. It has an ISO sensitivity of up to 12,800 in photo mode if you are in manual or pro mode, and also in video mode. But I would never recommend getting anywhere near that 12,800. I have found that the highest you want to go on the ISO is probably in the 3,000 to 4,000 range. Only if you had to stretch it that far. I highly recommend never really going above 1200 because there is very noticeable changes to your image and grain in ISO 1200 or above, and so I try to keep my ISO as low as possible. These are things that I talk about in the camera settings video, so once again, make sure to check that one out. Being able to shoot in up to 5.4K with this drone is huge, because that means with the 35 millimeter, I can shoot an image that's larger than what I need, and I can crop down inside of that image. That gives me a little bit of extra real estate to bring my shot in a bit. And so that was the main reason that I went with the 2S, because of that increased range of resolution. That was hugely important to me on a drone like this that doesn't have any zoom, where I have to zoom in and out by physically moving the drone closer or further away from my subject. Having a little bit of extra resolution there makes all the difference when it comes to cropping in and even producing some form of zoom within a scene where I couldn't do that normally unless I had a drone that had a zoom lens. The 20 megapixel raw images that this camera captures are pretty great as well. Like I said, I feel like this is kind of more like a smartphone that flies in the air than it is a DSLR or a mirrorless type camera, But if I have my camera settings right and I'm using pro mode and I'm shooting a raw image, I have a lot of ability to manipulate and make that image look really good. I've been showing you a few examples on the screen here as I've been talking. So this drone is a really capable drone. Yes, there are better drones out there that are going to capture better images, but they also are substantially more expensive than this drone. The Mavic 2S is a very capable drone, especially for the price, and it is what I use for the majority of my real estate photography, except for very high-end listings. Majority of the time I am taking the 2S with me. So 6 months later, I'm very happy with this drone. It's a very capable camera drone in most situations. Of course, lighting does become a factor with this drone. It doesn't have the dynamic range that a bigger drone with a more traditional style camera attached to it could capture, but it does produce fantastic images and gets the job done for me 99.9% of the time. And it folds up into a tiny package and is a really nice small drone that I could take anywhere. So I've got some links in the description below to this drone, to the SD cards, the micro SD cards that I use, the ND filters that I use for this drone, and of course, clicking on those links helps support the channel here. When you make a purchase, there's no cost to you. It's simply an affiliate link that takes you to Amazon. So I appreciate you checking those out. If you have any questions, definitely let me know down in the comment section below, and make sure to check out that camera settings video that I recommended to you earlier. It's going to help you better understand how to use the pro camera settings on your drone so that you can get the best quality images out of it as you can. So that's going to do it for this video. Thanks so much, and I hope to see you back in another one soon. Take care.